Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630, WMAL.
7:37 on the Morning Majority. You know, yesterday about this time, there were some bulletins that were crossing the wire about central banks around the world were taking a certain amount of action. I don't know exactly what it was. I mean, there's a lot of intellectual firepower in this room here. That
I wouldn't overdo it, but yes.
Yeah, but there is. And we talked among ourselves, and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on. The end result was the stock market went through the roof yesterday, almost 500 points. But it's a good thing that we have Stuart Varney on the line, because Stuart is a man who can take the complex economic stuff that goes on in the world and bring it home to terms that you and I can understand. So, Stu, can you, and first of all, it's good to have you on the show. Second of all, can you explain exactly what was going on yesterday and why the markets liked it so much?
Okay, try this. Europe ran out of money. They had a credit crunch. Banks wouldn't even lend to each other. So the U.S. Federal Reserve and the other big banks rode to the rescue, pumping in a load of cheap U.S. dollars. That fixed the temporary credit crunch crisis. However, it did not fix the overall problem in Europe, which is they can't pay their debt.
Well, now, is it too much to say that the U.S. is bailing out Europe?
That's a one way of putting it.
Is that too strong?
I think that's too strong, and I think it's slightly inaccurate.
Okay.
What America did yesterday, along with Canada, the UK, Switzerland, etc., what we did was make available money, cheap U.S. dollars. They'd run out of money. We made the cheap American greenback available to them. So we pumped in the dollars. We put in the currency that will grease the oils of the wheels of commerce, so to speak. That's what we did. Now, that's different from a bailout. That's not American taxpayer dollars going directly to Greece. That's not the case. However, if this is only a purely a temporary fix, they still got to get their house in order. They still got to bail themselves out. If they do that using IMF money, then we will have American taxpayer dollars directly going to Europe for a bailout.
All right, so the market's like this, and I guess there was other great economic news yesterday, is that rally going to continue? Almost 500 points yesterday.
Look, I don't know whether it's going to continue or not, but I'll tell you this. We are seeing some improving economic numbers in the United States, and we did see some expansionary moves by the Chinese government yesterday, along with this temporary fix for the Europe credit crunch. All of that's positive. Now, later on today, and again tomorrow morning, we're going to get some more news on the employment picture, and it's quite possible that it will be very favorable, and that will encourage the stock market rally to continue. So we've got some pretty good positive items on the horizon right now, and that's what the market's responding to.
So when you make a bunch of dollars cheaper for other folks to buy, who pays for that, and what does it cost? I mean, there's got to be a downside to that.
The United States Federal Reserve has trillions of dollars on its account. That is largely created money. The modern expression is they printed it. They're making that money available to Europe at a very cheap cost. It's not like we're going to pay a price for that.
Right.
The price that we pay is going to be an inflation. Because when you flood the world with dollars, you tend to raise the price of energy and food prices. And we've seen that happening in the last 24 hours. So the price we pay is not in our tax dollars, but in our inflationary environment, which lowers the purchasing power of the dollar in our wallet.
But
we pay a price.
Did we actually print money, or did we just make it easier for Europe to get our money?
We made it easier for Europe to get our money. That is backed up by the printing presses. Now, you don't actually crank out a couple of trillion $100 bills. It's an electronic blip.
Right.
That's
okay.
what it is.
All right. So let me be the contrarian on this. To me, when you have all of a sudden something happens overnight and all these big central banks get together and make a pretty bold move, there's something that we don't know about. Things are maybe worse off than we thought when everybody is getting together and acting responsible. Was it possible that there was a big bank that was going to fail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, precisely right. I don't think most people had realized it, but Europe was right. It was actually tipping over the cliff, just like we tipped over the cliff in September of 2008. What I mean by that is a credit crunch had arrived. Now, the banks weren't even lending to each other. You couldn't get your money. They couldn't make loans. Nobody was lending money to anybody else. That's the classic credit crunch, where the financial system seizes up. That moment arrived on Tuesday night. And, of course, on Wednesday morning, in comes the Fed, providing the money to keep things moving, the liquidity, as it's called.
Right.
That's what happened.
All right. The fact that China was involved yesterday, what does that tell you?
Well, China was not involved in the central bank action pumping money into Europe. The Chinese banking authorities were pumping more money or making more money available for their own economy because they're slowing down. The last thing the Chinese central authorities want is a slowing economy, because that's the bargain they've done with the people. Hey, you keep quiet and we'll make you prosperous. So if growth rates fall, they want to keep those growth rates up. So they changed their banking rules a little bit, pumping more money into their domestic economy. They were not part of the European rescue.
Okay, so if China then is worried about their own economy, and if we had a bank that may have been about to fail in Europe, and that there's still no long-term, real way looking forward for Europe, are things really better off here than the United States?
By comparison, yes. We do have a growth rate of 2%. We do have an employment picture which is brightening just a little. We do have a housing picture which showed a 10% gain for new home sales yesterday. That's improving just a little. So, okay, we look good by comparison. But when we start cheering a 2% growth rate, we've all got trouble.
That's right. Well, Stuart Varney is the host of Varney and Company on the Fox Business Network. And look, I mean, in the last few minutes, you have understood why he is so valued. Yep. Because he takes these complicated ideas and he explains them real good.
Thank you, Paul.
Stuart, it's good to have you. He's a good splainer.
Thank you.
It's good to have you, Stuart, and thanks for joining us here on The Morning Majority.